Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei married with Kunou part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video, and also go support the Aerex for writing that awesome fanfic. Let's start this video. Across his expression, his wide smile matched hers as his heart roared in happiness. To top it off, he couldn't help the fist pump that caught him at the moment. His day hadn't gone the best. However, until now, it was his best day ever. That wasn't even the best part yet. Amano Yuma giggled. The girl, one as perfectly beautiful as she, giggled at his cringy response. It rang through the ears like the music that he never knew he needed in his boring life. He watched onwards, absorbed in noticing every little thing about her. From the way her shirt crinkled as she huddled her arms around herself, to the way her laughter hadn't stopped nor changed in pitch, as she nearly fell back towards the railing behind her too, engrossed in joy to be panicked. Issei couldn't help but imagine his arms in place of hers, holding her tight. The boy had never wanted to hug someone so much before. He never knew he could feel that way. Obviously, he held off from doing so, thinking it would be too much for their first meeting. Too deep in his thoughts, Issei didn't realize the girl had approached. When her arms encompassed him, he froze. At that, she immediately pulled away, misunderstanding his reaction, too much. She held one arm in the other and looked away. Sorry, you were just so cute, I couldn't help myself. The cute, shy but wry smile atop her lips made his heart melt if it could still do so after hearing those words. Before he knew it, Issei had his arms around her. The boy felt his throat go patch with the realization. And no, he withheld his urge to scratch at his burning cheek. I wanted to hug you too, he trailed off, before remembering to add, if that's okay with you. There was a mischievous glint to the perfect girl's eyes as she responded with just enough sass. He knew not to take her words too seriously. What if I wasn't? The heavy blush smoldering over both her cheeks told Issei that she wasn't against this. So, despite the voice in his head telling him to do otherwise, he pulled her closer. Eep. He hadn't been able to do it previously in his astonishment, but her hair smelled nice and her ample bosom against his chest was, to put it simply, to die twice for. It was such a great feeling, he couldn't help the sign that escaped from his lips. Without meaning to, the boy had sent the hot air directly against the girl's ear. It drew a shudder from the black-haired girl. Issei misunderstood, stepping away to pull off his uniform's blazer. It's really windy today, huh? And, to be fair, it was. Why yeah, she pulled the blazer tightly around her before looking back up at him. Would you be cold? Issei simply smiled as he mentally screenshotted the perfect picture with his chocolate gaze. After first confession screenshot saved. Description. Yuma asked if you're cold after accepting your blazer. Refer to scenes tab in your profile. Saving the notification for later, he masked his surprise with a shake of his head. I'm so happy right now that there's no way I could be cold. He did a few silly dances, trying to see if he could make her laugh again and to reassure her before she could inquire more. It was pretty chilly out, but it no longer bothered him. He had the skill, gamer's body, after all. He succeeded. You're so silly, hi Issei-kun. From within his blazer, she hunched over, trying her best to not let go of the aforementioned piece of clothing while holding her sides. You need to stop so I can breathe. Even though his body ached, his cheeks burned with his near-permanent smile, and his heart throbbed uncontrollably in his heaving chest, he giggled childishly. I like hearing you laugh, Amano-cha. Yuma. There was a pale finger to his nose. Yuma, silly. There was a hand to her hip as she reprimanded him. Call me, Yuma. Ma. All of a sudden, he felt himself grow immensely shy. Why he had never called a girl by their first name. Why Yuma-chan, it was his first time. There was silence as she gave him a certain look. However, he was too embarrassed to look back, and so, he missed the upwards tug on her lips. The noise did awesome things in his active mind. I like the sound of that. Issei-kun having been too preoccupied with enjoying her laughter in the previous instance, Issei felt himself shrink even more at the sound of his name. Especially in a tone like that. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. The boy watched her turn away, waving. Only for her to stop suddenly. I'll return your blazer tomorrow. I'll wash it too. What an angel. Grace. Angel unlocked. Entry found in encyclopedia. Not trusting his voice, he waved at her and waved the dialogue box away as coolly as possible, given his current fluster. When she was finally out of sight, and hopefully out of audible range, he did the only thing he could think to do. In your face Mitsuda and Motohama. I got a girlfriend first. With a slight skip in his steps, he started on his trek home. The day was truly the best of days. Now, if only he could get his hands on that new Aerex, today would have been even more than absolutely perfect. Ka-san. Guess what happened to me? Issei. I'm almost done getting changed, Ka-san, I promise. The girl you were gushing about is at the front door. Issei dropped everything to rocket out his door, past his mom, who yelled something else at him, and to the front entrance. That was where he slid to a stop, freezing in his tracks. There he tried his best to play off his rush coolly. He failed miserably at the sight of her. Oh hey, good morning, Amano-chan. His breath hitched in his throat as the perfect girl approached him quickly. She stopped and pulled a bundle between them. Hey yourself. I said it's you ma. Hey sorry. The boy scratched at his cheek. I'm still getting used to this, you know. His eyes, having finally left her body, noticed that the bundle was his blazer. Oh, thanks for bringing it back. Slipping it on, he marveled at the simple exultation of having such a caring girlfriend. Even freshly clean and still warm. You look like you needed it anyway, Issei-kun. Her gaze swept over him. It caused him to be self-conscious. The boy realized he only had a shirt, blazer, and briefs on. His mouth opened to scream, but a hand covered it. Ho, this is the little miss you were bragging to us. Issei's father bowed a little, pulling Issei down with him. Please take care of my honest rascal. The dialogue box above his dad bounced at his exaggerated movements. Issei could feel his heart soar at the sight of his dad's emotions. Name: Haidu Masaru. Race: human. LVL. 15. Description: seeks to understand why Yuma would to date Issei. Emotions: hopeful, proud, wonderment. It's nothing, Haidu-san. The girl bowed back, deeper than the man. Please allow me to date your lovely son, instead. I told you she's an angel. The boy blurted. Though, it came out a little muffled from underneath his dad's hand. Realizing that, it smacked it away. At the interaction, the girl giggled. It made both males smile. She was a cute one, indeed. How'd you bag this one, huh, Ice? The boy had a hand already scratching at his cheek. I don't know, Tusan. It was still embarrassing to know what his dad felt. It added a whole new dimension to their interactions. Ice. Issei. The matriarch climbed down the stairs, only to pull on Issei's ear. Young man, go put on some pants. She ignored his cries of pain, dragging him to the stairs. Moments later, the woman returned to her husband's side. Please pardon my son. She paused. State, she decided on as she bowed, slightly. No, there's no need. Yuma brought a hand to her mouth, trying to stifle yet another laugh. I thought it was cute that he wanted to greet me so quickly. Really? How did my son get someone like you? Masaru. What? I know you're thinking it too. Ow. The girl failed to hide her snicker as the woman pinched his cheek. Shoo. The woman pushed her husband away. Let me have some girl-to-girl with my son's first girlfriend. The man didn't protest, only sending the girl a wink. Anyway, Amano-chan, was it? Yuma-chan works too, the girl said cutely, thinking it was the correct thing to say. Amano-san, then. Suddenly, the woman was nearly overwhelmed as she just stood there in the hallway in front of Yuma. If you break my only baby's heart, I'll break you, okay? The girl could only nod stiffly. Great, you must understand my son is stubborn, honest, and oblivious but delicate. The woman stopped, taking the girl's hands on her own. Please take care of my baby boy. Oh of course, Haidu-san. The woman had decided to hold off from sharing too much. There was no need to burden the girl with knowledge that even Issei was unaware of. She was overbearing enough as is. Although she hoped this Yuma-chan would be the good influence that her far too honest son needed. Name: Haidu Mickey. Race: human. LVL. 16. Description: being the overbearing mom. Emotions: worried, proud, mournful. Seeing the dialogue box and his mother's complicated expression, he decided it would be better to cut in now. His cheery voice pierced the heavy atmosphere. Amano. Yuma couldn't help it. Moo, it's Yuma. The purple-eyed girl froze as she fought the urge to look back to his mom. Sorry, Yuma-chan, I'm still getting used to this. He turned to give his mom a familiar hug, a tradition of the household before school. I'll be going now with Yuma-chan. Be good, Ice. And again, please take care of my son, Yuma-chan. Of course. The junior high students giggled together because they had responded at the same time. Walking at an ordinary pace, he trailed behind his skipping girlfriend. He had a nice time watching her hips sway back and forth and the way her skirt fluttered up without showing too much. Though, with how the almost too short skirt stuck out a bit, her bottom was quite pronounced. In a year or two, Issei-kun, come on. However, hearing her voice snapped him out of his memorized days. Only to find her face was in personal space. What's on your mind, Ice? The black-haired girl suddenly turned away from him, hiding her face in her hands. Can I call you Ice? I thought of that nickname last night. The effect was near instantaneous as a hand went to his nose at the idea of a girl thinking about him late at night. Although, your parents already. His voice came out stuffy. Yuma-chan, you can call me whatever you want. As she turned on a heel, Issei watched her get back into his personal space. Poking his cheek down from her shorter stature, she reiterated, still. What's on your mind, Ice? Again, his hand went back to his cheek, embarrassed but willing to share his thoughts. Honestly. This still feels like a dream, you know. He averted her eyes from her curious purple haze. I never wanted to end those sea cause you're so beautiful. Ah, what am I saying? His cheeks felt like they wanted to burn as he fought down his nervous and embarrassed smile. He missed Yuuma's initial reaction. His other hand felt warm within something so smooth and soft that the boy just had to turn back. The much too perfect girl for him had held it in both hers. All the while, her moist eyes peered up at him in what he could only assume was happiness. It made his heart pound in his ears as such happiness infected him instantly. Ooh, I'm the one who asked you out. The young woman pouted slightly, which only served to raise her cuteness levels to areas he had never thought were possible. I should be the one making you fall in love right now. You already are. Suddenly, she went stock still as the near-permanent blush across her expression deepened. There was silence, in which he realized he had unknowingly spoken his thoughts aloud. That only furthered the silent staring between the two. However, she turned away before he could have second thoughts about the silence, still holding his hand in one of hers. Their mutual silence became comfortable as they held hands the rest of the way to school. I could get used to this. Those who passed by watched onwards in equal parts jealous and amazement. Many had uniforms matching the pairs as they whispered to one another. Some pulled out phones to take pictures. Others did so to spread the news and conspiracies. The Haidu Issei got himself a girlfriend. And, not just any girl for that matter. As he made it through the door to his classroom, all the heads shifted to him and the girl holding his hand. All of them had heard the rumors. Among those, his best friends gawked, nearly dropping the Era magazine between them. Issei, you bastard. But the silence broke. Having known his best friends for years, he'd think his first reaction to push his girlfriend behind himself was warranted so they wouldn't accidentally hit her. However, they stopped short, fists shaking in some intense emotion. Bitsuda started, I thought you were totally shitting us last night, man. The athlete patted his shoulders, nodding in pride. Especially with a beauty like Amano-san. Motohama followed up with various flashes of the camera he always seemed to carry. Ah, perfect pose, if only Issei would scoot over so I can get your first girlfriend in the picture. The young man was and would be careful to not take rather raunchy pictures without permission. The bro code must be upheld. Name? Miyahara Mitsuda. Race? Human. LVL. 11. Description. Congratulations on getting a girl. Emotions? Jealous, proud, resolute. Name? Tanaka Motohama. Race? Human. LVL. 9. Description. Planning to send you physical copies later. Emotions? Jealous, proud, mischievous. Issei ignored the ever-lingering pop-up over their heads. The boy was too busy fighting the manly tears at their acceptance. Honestly, their reactions were unexpected, having read their initial disbelief last night. It made him feel guilty to know they were jealous, yet infinitely more grateful since they did not act on it. He threw his arms over both of them, and suddenly, everything in the world was alright. Aw man, I love you guys. Then, he remembered his girlfriend was still waiting to be introduced. He pulled back, gesturing back to his girl, meet my perfect little girlfriend, Amano Yuma. The boy didn't realize it, but the girl had been watching onward with interest the whole time. These are your friends. Her statement could have come off as haughty if it weren't for the soft tone and smile she gave. Though, she soon blocked it with a hand. They seem pretty funny, Fufu. Yup. They share my love for Aerex and women alike. At his proclamation, all three of them bumped a fist together. 3 brothers from different mothers. Uma giggled more at their antics before giving a small bow. I hope I won't be intruding too much. They all shook their heads vigorously. Then, after giving various degrees of no, she continued, then, please take care of me. It was no surprise that they swooned together. Yuma really was the perfect name. Amano Yuma. Race. Human. LVL. Description. Finds you and your friends a great change of pace, but emotions? Hopeful, giddy, reserved. Issei ignored the question marks again, his interest lay more in the reserved part of the emotions section. Sure, Yuma was rather lonely. The type of girl to help when asked, always with a smile, but otherwise kept to herself. His eyes widened. Maybe, just maybe, she was too shy to be completely herself. She was far more expressive last afternoon and at his house. Although the bit of gap mode was pretty good. However, the young man would prefer her to be herself. There was no need to hold herself back. Mentally, he nodded. Promising himself to remember to ask about it later, they made way for the teacher and slid into their seats. A few rows away, Yuma gave a small wave. His cheeks gained a red tint as he waved back. Life was looking . Thankfully, lunch came sooner rather than later. His immediate attention swerved to his girlfriend, who smiled then turned to put her materials away. His upward lips curved into a wry smile. In his excitement, he had almost forgotten to do the same. How embarrassing. The bald head peeked into the corner of Issei's gaze. Hey Issei. In his excitement, the boy had also forgotten about his friends. Yeah. What do you want for lunch? Mitsuda gained a smirk, shooting a glance back at the black-haired girl who was just approaching them. The taller male then grasped his shoulder. On me. Began with the hospitality. Issei could feel his heart grow warm in his chest. Surprise me, Mitsuda. It was then Motohama introduced his lens into Issei's face. The lens just happened to be in the rays of light from the sun, blinding him. Ah. Get it out of my face. Ah, sorry, the shutter went off. No flash went off as they were already in more than sufficient lighting. Just wanted to commemorate my best friend's first day with a girlfriend. The glasses-clad boy grinned down towards the digital picture. Oh, a girl's voice started behind Motohama. That's a cute one. Could I get a copy, please? Issei felt his cheeks burn. Oh my gosh, get this expression. The boy didn't know how to react and froze. Behind the camera, Motohama was grinning widely. He hadn't known his friend was so weak to such attention. Well, different, this side of Issei wasn't terrible. And once again, the shutter clicked. Well, let's just go to our usual spot. The tree. The recent addition to the group inquired. At that, they all stared at her. I've seen you there. She blushed, unable to meet any of their eyes. Alright, he felt his cheeks burn as he came to the realization that Yuma had been watching him for a while. MMH. Was her cute noise as she nodded. His lips couldn't help but form a matching smile. This was his cute girlfriend. In her hands, he noticed a large packed lunch. Damn, I don't think I can live without her if she keeps on being too perfect. Issei snapped himself out of his thoughts. He caught the fact his bald friend had already started his way towards the door. Mitsuda, we won't start without you. Finishing the sentence, he realized he wouldn't need the food. He decided he would save it for later. Dinner alone hasn't been filling him up as much after his late afternoon routine changed. His stats wouldn't increase by themselves after all. Yeah, save a spot for me. The bald boy jogged out the room, dodging people in a hurry. The lunch lines would be packed if he walked across the campus. It would be best to get a move on now and fast for his buddy. Yosh, let's go. Walking down the hallways, he finally noticed how everyone was staring at him. It was a bit embarrassing. Usually, he dealt with such attention by focusing on his friends. And so, he turned his awareness to the two behind him. He remembered exactly why he took the lead. Yuma was just too cute. So much so that he probably wouldn't survive the walk to his usual lunch area. She was blushing heavily, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Her hands were tightly gripping her cutely wrapped lunchbox. It made him guilty to know he did nothing to help alleviate her embarrassment, and so, he slowed down with that in mind. He tapped her shoulder. It drew her from her stupor as she blinked up to him. Sorry about them like me, I guess they can't really believe us. He smiled wryly, expressing his embarrassment and admitting that, it should only be like this for a few days at least, he'd assumed so. They would be some long days though. Hopefully, all the attention won't scare her away. His girlfriend threw a glance back out to the other students before nodding. Why yeah. In front of them, a shutter noise clicked. Gotcha lovebirds. The couple flinched then stumbled. Issei, hearing his girlfriend yelp, fell forwards, trying to catch her. He failed. However, he hadn't expected Yuma to show a case of unexpected reflexes and strength. Then again, she wasn't the athletic star of the school for no reason. She held him, flushed against her smaller body with one arm, and her other was outstretched, bent at the elbow, but firm against the wall behind her, so her head and back wouldn't slam into it. Hey, are you okay, Ice? She asked as she slicked back, having success in stabilizing them. Yeah, thanks for catching me. He muttered embarrassedly. His manly pride cracked along the seams. The only thing alleviating it from shattering was the feeling of her malleable pillows against his chest. Gods above, did he want to rest his face there for the rest of his life? He couldn't wait to see her in high school. Ping. Race. Got unlocked. Entry found in encyclopedia. He froze. Although, with Angel being a race as well, there would have to be at least a god for them to serve under. At very least, that was true in manga and anime. Yuma, remembering the events from last evening, hugged him. She knew the effect her admittedly large chest for a middle school student had on the open pervert. No problem, Ice. And, she was more than okay with it. The purple-eyed girl caught herself and pulled away swiftly, moving to pick up the packed lunch that had fallen. Thankfully, it didn't spill all its contents. Oh thank God, however, as she pulled up the bundle, they all noticed the stains on the sides. Her shining amethyst eyes pooled with tears as a hand trembled against her mouth. And no, it's all ruined. Impulsively, Issei jumped into action. One of his hands gently pulled the bundle out from her grasp. His mother held her shoulder as he turned her away, before picking her up bridal style. Due to the suddenness of the action, not even Yuma was able to react. He, on the other hand, wasn't thinking anything except how he would never want to see her cry again. Even though she wasn't someone important to him until yesterday, she had already burrowed into his heart deeply. He'd do everything in his power to keep it that way. Within him, the sleeping dragon shifted. It took a sudden jolt as they rounded a corner to remind Yuma that he was actually carrying her. The athletic girl could feel his arms struggling to hold her up as his face strained outward with exertion. His chest huffed and puffed against her arm. It was very obvious that he wasn't the strongest of individuals, to say the least. She, however, could respect the drive. Ice, you can put me down, why you know. Then not huff, not until we get to a secluded area. There was another jolt since he swerved by a corner. Her increasingly embarrassed gaze drifted out towards the people watching. Some gave them space for Issei to run past, and some pointed with various whispers. Her once sad-stricken face was now burning red while she fumbled out her next words. I'm okay now, I promise. She shut her eyes, trying to make herself as small as possible. If Issei was paying any more attention to her, he would be stricken with glee at such cuteness. Then, all sense of gravity was lost. In other words, they were falling. As if noticing her gaze, the boy simply smiled at her. There was no trace of fear or any sense of hesitation from the boy. Ice. He didn't respond. Ice's focus had quickly turned to land at the bottom of the stairs. His feet slammed the ground, and then he braced his legs, those of which he had only spent a little under a month training. Oof. Issei stumbled once, then twice before suddenly turning around, so that his back would push open the entrance to outside. He didn't make a sound from the impact shock across his back. From there, his destination rested in the afternoon sun. Thank the gods for my str and end. He only laughed, shifting around so he could let her down gently. After that, he landed on the ground beneath the shade of the tree. All the while, he had breathed heavily through his laughter. Man, I wasn't sure if I could make it. He clenched his raised left hand before setting it down. US should have put me down then. Nah, Issei started, still huffing for breath, had to get you out of there. He pulled out the bundle of food from who knows where. The girl had completely forgotten about it. Struggling to open it with his exhausted arms, he released the food from its confines. The cloth holding it together became a sort of mini picnic sheet. Though one riddled with many stains. Yuma was silent as she watched him sort and clean up the mess to the best of his abilities. If you made it for me and it fell to the floor, I would have eaten it right then and there, you know. The girl could only cover her face because she imagined him doing so in front of all the spectators. Bending over herself a bit, she allowed herself to peek through her fingers. Issei was trying his best to eat the food she had made, no matter how terribly mismatched it was, and no matter how many times his trembling arm made the food fall from her pink spoon. Let me help you, Ice. She kneeled before the boy who sat crisscross. His chocolatey eyes widened while her hand took the oily spoon from him. Say There was no hesitation as he took the spoonful into his mouth. Although after a few spoonfuls, she noticed Issei's gaze lingered on her thighs, which were wrapped with thigh-high stockings, identical to the ones from yesterday. She couldn't help the half-smirk from appearing as she patted her creamy thighs with an acknowledging tilt of her head. His eyes widened with understanding. "See, can I?" were all the words that he could muster at that moment, lest he'd drool. In response, her lips only widened with amusement, then came her small nod. Collecting a surprising amount of energy, the boy scrambled so that the back of his head rested against her pale thighs. A sigh left his lips as he relaxed. Though, he blinked as he recalled something. His eyes lingered on the underside of her blossoming chest before he caught her fascinated gaze. The food was like, super good. It reminded me of my childhood friend's mom. He furrowed his brows a bit. She was European, I think. Her gaze flicked away from Issei's at those words. I lived up there in Europe for a few years. Did you know? The boy shook his head before taking another spoonful. It was understandable that he didn't know. After all, only the school knew due to her transfer papers. It was quite lonely and boring up there though. She turned her gaze to the sky, lost in her thoughts. The boy wasn't sure how to read the look exactly, but wanted to say something. Her expression hinted at something like sad nostalgia. Never mind the window above her head, reading with things like regret, nostalgia, longing. I'm here for you now. Issei scratched at his cheek, averting his gaze as his cheeks dusted pink. I noticed that at school you keep to yourself. I don't know what schooling is like over there, but you can be yourself like the cute you I saw at the bridge. He ruffled his hair. Gah. Again, what am I saying? Ice, you're tickling me. My bad. In his awkwardness, he forgot he was still stopping her perfectly soft thighs. However, when a shadow blocked the small beams of light that came through the leaves, he turned to see what was blocking the light. Only for his lips to go warm. Both pairs of eyes widened as Yuma pulled away. How embarrassing. I meant to kiss your cheek as thanks. Oh sorry about that. Not to say I didn't want to kiss you before cause Ignore that. Erase it from memory. All of it. Seeing his red face, she knew it was already too late. Her gaze drifted anywhere but where Issei lay with a dumb smile. She hoped that no one saw anything. And, fortunately for her, there was no one around except a certain pair of boys who weren't hiding very well. She steadied herself, a hand to her chest. Her anxiety should be able to calm down here. In the time Yuma took to control her breathing, Issei tried to calm himself as well. The combination between the softness of her thighs and the emotional almost physical rush from their lips pressing together made it nearly impossible for the impulsive boy. Though, for his girlfriend's sake, he would, in a heartbeat. Still, thank you. However, hearing her whisper, the brown-haired boy immediately bounced back to reality, giggling. No problem, Yuma-chan. The energy within him suddenly fully restored. I promise I'll get used to saying Yuma-chan by tomorrow. Before he was allowed the chance to use that energy for anything else, the sound of a shutter going off from behind Yuma alerted Issei to the presence of his best friends, if the ever-lingering boxes over their heads hadn't. Although he noticed, Yuma hadn't flinched at all this time. Instead, she gave them a smile and a wave. It seemed that she held no hard feelings and was also perceptive enough to see them in the greenery. Motohama had the decency to at least look sheepish, releasing a wry laugh. Couldn't help myself. The boy turned away, slightly, before bowing deeply. Sorry about the food as well, Amano-san. Yuma glanced at the forgotten food to the side. Nearly half the food was already gone. It's okay. She tried to cheer up a bit. I'll get over it, her stomach growled. She fought the urge to cry out denials and hide away as she forced herself to continue, forgetting to eat breakfast. I was busy finishing the lunchbox because her gaze wandered to her boyfriend. Oh. Yuma-chan, you should eat some, it's still good. There was suddenly a spoon to her lips. It slipped in her mouth as she tried to protest. Thankfully, the purple-eyed girl didn't choke in surprise. Rather, she gave him a mix of a cute glare and a puffy pout, chewing slowly. Her food wasn't as terribly mixed as she thought it was. Nevertheless, it was still embarrassing to be spoon-fed in front of his friends. She wanted to do it to him. Sorry, I didn't mean to put it in so suddenly. The sound of something hitting the dirt drew the pair from one another. It was Motohama's camera, they realized as his hands looked strangely empty without it. Right after it, Masuda's voice nearly hissed in disbelief. Ice. Innuendos. Do you not realize what you said? Didn't mean to put it in so as his face blossomed into a brilliant red as he nearly fell over backward, fumbling over his words. All the while, the grin on Yuma's face grew until it burst open into muffled laughter. It caught all three of the boys off guard. Ice isn't like that. She took a short pause to swallow the food, else she'd choke. Then, the black-haired girl noticed the infamous trio staring at her, since it was oddly silent while she swallowed. Sorry, She hiccuped. It was the cutest thing they've heard in forever. It was just in line with her next reaction. Hiding behind Issei. It wasn't until the end of the lunch period did the hiccups come to an end. The shame, he missed the feeling of her chest against his back. Pressing up against him, flinching at every hic. And pouting as he tried his best to keep the teasing on the low, those were the memories that kept him distracted in his afternoon classes. More than a few times, he was completely absorbed by his new thoughts that, Haidu-kun. Sorry sensei. It won't happen again. This is the third time, Haidu-kun. It won't happen a fourth time then. His teacher could only shake her head. Hey, Issei, Masuda wrapped an arm over the self-proclaimed harem king, you haven't been hanging out with us lately. They glanced at their other friend, who nodded solemnly. Don't think I haven't seen you getting faster in PE neither, Ice. As the athletic one, I have to make sure you don't catch up. In his eyes, the boy had a competitive glint. Issei could only give a laugh, better not make that a promise. Getting a little cocky now that you have a girlfriend, huh? It was Motohama who spoke that time. I'm not blind either, even with my glasses off. You've been asking for my help with schoolwork less and less. Wrapping his arm over Masuda's, the brown-haired boy scratched at his cheek. I guess you've caught me. Having started a new game, he could see his parents' more personal thoughts to a degree. They never voiced their disappointment or other negative thoughts. It was constant that plagued their minds. It was unnecessary. Most importantly, it was very easily rectifiable. And, with that dim reminder and the fact he would be increasing his stats, he sought to better himself. He blinked, realizing his friends were staring at him. They were waiting for him to continue. I just wasn't anyone special, I guess. You're a star athlete, Masuda. Motohama is like the smartest guy in class. Something like that, he trailed off. These thoughts, Issei felt, didn't need to worry his only friends. And so, he immediately brightened back up with a smile and a wide grin. I can't be the harem king without growth. His smile grew so wide that it hurt. He couldn't help it since his friends were smiling right beside him. Without me, you mean? Why Yuma-chan? I've been watching you for a while, so of course, I know of your master plan, Ice. The black-haired girl then approached him. Unconsciously, Masuda released her boyfriend, moving to Motohama's side to watch. And, unlike Issei, they noticed a small playful tug of her lips before she whispered into his ear, let's go on a date on Sunday. The effect on the motionless boy was delayed as she realized her mistake. There were way too many eyes on them. In her growing embarrassment, she rushed to her desk to grab her things and then scurried out. All the while, the class watched onwards in a state of confusion and intrigue. The boy suddenly shot up, throwing his chair back. "Oyahhh." Without waiting, he gathered his things and ran after her. He held back the urge to yell to the world that he had a date though. Yuma must have whispered it for a reason after all. Besides, teasing him in front of everyone. Passing through the entrance gates, Yuma stood to the side, face ablaze and her bag clenched in front of her chest. Then, as if she felt his gaze, she turned to him with a shy smile. Ice, I keep forgetting to get your number." Patching on quickly, he fumbled a hand into his bag, of course. They exchanged numbers promptly. However, with that done, she kept giving him shy glances. In her description, it read debating on how to walk with you. And so, he could only smile a bit wider. "Which way do you go, Yuma?" Her head shot up at the question with her mouth open to answer. Immediately afterward, she stopped to avert her eyes. "We can part ways at the bridge, okay?" Her blue window shifted, suggesting she was hiding something. He could only assume it was still too early for him to pry. "No problem." Her face blossomed with a small smile, and he knew he picked the right response. "Oh, man," he jumped into his bed as various scenarios played themselves in his admittedly active imagination. "I can't wait for the weekend." He rolled around in his excitement. If he were a girl, he was sure he would have made it sound. Ultimately, he fell off with an oof. His face landed on a cold surface. As he picked himself, the cold surface was revealed to be an Ero manga. The title was God's Little Angels, a gift from Mitsuda. His brown eyes widened. Immediately, his mind went to the notifications from earlier in the day. Under his breath, he muttered, "Encyclopedia." Following that, a little menu popped up. He was only interested in one of them. Races. And so he tapped that sub-menu, then the next two options he was interested in. Encyclopedia, races, humans, dogs, cats, fish, birds, lizards, angels, 3. Otherwise known as angels. Unlocked due to close proximity to holy energy. Winged beings with a distinguishable halo that utilize holy energy. Unlocked due to close proximity to holy energy. They fall when they aren't virtuous. Unlocked due to close proximity to fallen presence. Net. 1. Gods. 1. Beings of unimaginable energy and power. Unlocked due to close proximity to immense holy energy. Net. 1. How his encyclopedia confirmed the existence of angels and gods otherwise, that all told him nothing he hadn't already known. Although, the notes having close proximity made him think various thoughts all surrounding the fact there was some kind of angel watching him. A new race was only unlocked when he had seen them however, he couldn't recall seeing any angels previously, never mind recently. His lecherous gaze snapped to the fallen presence. Perhaps, it was just a fallen angel. It was confirmed that angels could fall, but it didn't show up as a separate race. Maybe he'd see one in the future. For now, he'd reflect on his life. Despite everything, there have only been very few real changes in his mundane life since unlocking the gamer gear, surprisingly. The first was a lack of free time. Previously, most of his time after school was spent at Mudahama's house, where he and his friends would just look at various pornographic media or finish schoolwork. He now spent most of his time bettering himself. It showed as he was slowly catching up to Masuda's athletic prowess and Mudahama's intelligence. He wasn't oblivious to the changes to his parents' emotions once they saw him nowadays. It was nice to have that positive reinforcement. It was the introduction of Yuma Amano, a classmate of his since the beginning of the year. She had become the star student of his graduating class, easily. Her perfect looks only helped the fact she was also a perfect student as well. Many classmates if they drew the confidence to even bother her would seek her help. Though, when confessed to, she would politely reject them every time. However, he hadn't actually interacted with her until his eyes widened. A month ago, he bumped into her. That was the same day he passed out in school. Following that, he awoke with a game-like notification. Why Yuma-chan really is an angel, the unconsciously released words came out as a whisper of disbelief. It would explain the variance in her status. No one in his age group was at such a high level. All the adults he has seen weren't so high either. A feminine voice called from the other side of his door, "Ice." There was a knock on his door before it opened. "Are you okay?" From her position, it must have looked like he was ogling over the Ero manga. It explained her next words. I'll just. Mom," the boy leveled his gaze with hers, "I was just thinking about throwing it out." Her eyes widened as he blinked down to it, or, at the very least, returned it to Masuda. He trailed off, noticing the way her translucent blue panel shifted. "Sorry about the noise, I fell off the bed." He couldn't help the toothy smile. "I was too excited about my date on Sunday." Daily reminder. 5:30 p.m. Evening training, quests. Right on time. The brunette jumped up from his finished homework, stuffing everything back into his bag. Then, he swiped away the message showing his increase of the int stat. It was now time to not quite lie to his mom and tell her he was heading towards the library. he just wasn't going to enter it. There was an area not too far behind it where people strayed away. It was said that yokai were around there. Though, such things were impossible, right? His encyclopedia hadn't updated itself with any mentions of them, so he assumed as much. Maybe I haven't met one. Shaking his head, he heaved the bag over his shoulder and set out. Off to the library again. Time for a run. As always, he missed her farewell and content smile. When did my baby boy become so active and studious? Sprint. Sprint skill active. Humming to a stop as he entered the clearing, he grabbed for a bottle of water before setting his bag against a tree. He downed the entire bottle in a few gulps. Yosh. Time to grind. He shut his eyes and stuck a pose where his left arm protruded out in front of him. When he opened his eyes, red energy materialized around his outstretched arm. It formed a gauntlet as he clenched his fist. Just the sight of it made his lips curl into a smirk, that never gets old. The gauntlet was called a twice critical. It doubled his base stats and had its own experience bar. In a world as peaceful, thankfully, as his, the only way to level, whether himself or the sacred gear, was through exercise and the occasional personal goal turned side quest. So far, he hasn't unlocked any skills or abilities for the gauntlet to level as well. The rustle of leaves drew his attention. Thing. Name. Kunou. Race. Fox. LVL. Description. Smells food after a long run. Emotions. Hungry, curious, sly. Subspecies. Fox. Unlocked. Entry found in encyclopedia. He turned to the bush only to see a surprisingly bright golden yellow fox. The fox was untainted in appearance, outside a few leaves on it. Getting over his initial depression at seeing a small animal with a far higher level than him, he blinked back. Perhaps, it was a pet he thought as it slowly approached him. It reminded him of Motohama's cat, oddly. It then sniffed the air. Its nose was pointed upwards, towards his bag. That was when Issei remembered the food in his bag. "You must be hungry, huh?" he said in a more habitual manner. Not everyone had a transparent window telling them about how something was feeling, after all. Balancing that in his life was much harder than he expected. Early in his new life, various people thought he could read their minds. The fox yelped, bringing him out of his thoughts. It sounded like a yes and dog fox. In the back of his head, a thought said not to feed the wildlife. He ignored it in favor of his own curiosity. It was rather cute, and this was the first time he's seen a real fox in person. His encyclopedia attested to that with the new entry, after all. He dug into his bag, slowly, so as to not startle the fox. Finding the plastic-wrapped turkey sandwich, he unwrapped it and set it between them. Afterward, he took a few steps back and crouched. It helped to make himself smaller and reinforce he meant no harm. He laughed to himself as he watched the animal dig into it with its tail wagging slightly. Pretty good, right? The fox's ears twitched at the question, but otherwise, it kept eating undeterred. The school may not have the best teachers, but they certainly have the best cooks. He felt his hand twitch, struggling to hold the urge to pet it. The fur seemed so irresistibly soft at the closer distance. The teen boy couldn't take it any longer. He approached slowly. Thankfully, the sun was glaring in his direction, so the shadow wouldn't loom over the blonde fox. Whether or not it noticed him, Issei couldn't tell while he leaned over slightly to pet it. Soft. The fox made no reaction as he brushed his hands through the golden fur. It made him more confident. All the while, he sat crisscrossed behind it. There was no way this was a wild animal. It was too tame, clean, and comfortable. The fur was also much softer than it looked. Something, or rather someone, must be heavily doting on this fox. Unless foxes were just as cunning as the story said they were, however, to clean each other to this degree. He released a wry smile at the thought. The shuffling to the bushes ahead of them drew his attention. With a glance to the fox, the same could be said for the little thing as well. Without realizing it, the sky above changed from a soft blue to a heterologous mixture of various reds and pinks. And before him, out from the greenery, a towering muscled blue figure stepped out with a heaving breath. "Bra can smell you." Ping. Name. Brack the High Guard. Race. Evolved Oni. LVL. Description. Searching for the princess. Emotions. Annoyed. His body froze, unconsciously, as he read the description for the first yokai he met. It was a yokai since a separate window told him of the new entry to the encyclopedia. He assumed evolved Oni would be listed as a subspecies, like a fox to dogs. With practiced ease, he mentally pushed away all the notifications. He was too shaken up to even gloss over the details of the various notifications. The monstrous figure's gaze drifted towards the junior high student, then to the fox. All of a sudden, his Issei assumed a male from a lack of chest coverings description, changed to going to pry your dead hands from the princess. The blue behemoth's singular emotion also switched in the same instance, from annoyed to enraged. As if its eyes shifting to a glowing red wasn't enough of a signal. Then, there was a special ping for an important prompt. New quest. Protect the cursed princess from the male uprising. Details, ACCEPT, deny. He wasn't able to accept, deny nor mentally reveal the details of the quest because two more monstrous figures came from the same bushes. One was named Quarks the High Guard and the other, Walk the Ward Enforcer. Both had their levels far surpassing his as their levels both showed both were as equally enraged at the sight of the fox. Both were marching in his direction. And, all three of them were as equally disgusting in appearance and smell. However, hearing the fox, who he could only assume was the princess, hiss, he finally snapped out his stupor. Without a moment's hesitation, he scooped up the princess, boosted himself with his twice critical, and ran deeper in the seemingly endless forest. The golden fox in his arms only yelped once, making no real attempt to escape his arms. Don't worry, I got you. He couldn't waste a moment to glance down at its her curious gaze. In his racing mind, he could only watch the seconds count down in the corner until the boost buff would fade. He would be left most vulnerable since it would leave him quite drained. There were only 112 seconds until the buff ended. Even with the buff, the heavy footfalls of the Oni still seemed rather near. He bit his lip, forcing himself to brush it off. He needed to focus on going faster. Sprint. Sprint skill active, 0. His shining eyes widened as he stumbled into a fall, barely succeeding to dodge a branch. Bracing himself to take the brunt of the impact, he curled around the fox only to slam against a blue hard object. And no, there was a window above him. His horror lay with the words, Brack the High Guard. Brack here. Thinking quickly as Brack reached downwards, Issei scrambled beneath the giant's legs. With his drained state, he hadn't even bothered to hit at the back of the knee as he dodged. As much as he pained to admit it, he was probably too weak to even make it feel anything. Come on, Ice. You got this. He cheered himself weakly. For the first time, his muscles were so sore from strenuous use. He couldn't help but wonder if he had broken his previous speed records. He didn't wonder long as something sent him flying through a pair of oblivious trees. His vision flickered. His throat felt sore. Maybe he screamed. He couldn't remember. Everything had gone black when pain exploded all across his back. However, in his fading vision, the golden fox's face was up on his own, licking him. His lips tried to tug into a smile. It smelled of the cafeteria from school. Funny coincidence, right? He bounced slightly, it jarred him from his numb thoughts. The combined steps of the Oni shook the ground around them. He supposed they didn't care to hide anymore. On the edge of his vision, the window read. Protect the cursed princess from male uprising, still waiting for him to read its details. In his hurry, he had forgotten to officially start it. He bounced again. He couldn't even protect one girl. Literally, the only reason I trained the 15-year-old couldn't help but think, full of mirth. Speaking of girls, he still had a date with Yuma. It made him think of how sad she would be. Just the thought of seeing her cry filled him with energy with rage. The fire of such anger burned brightly within him. He never wanted to see her cry again. Just trying to imagine her crying over his death made him want to punch the Onis's heads off. Whatever that male uprising was, he didn't care for it. They were in his way. He just needed to boost one more time. It didn't matter if his stamina was dangerously low. Yuma's crying and laughing expressions filled him with energy. It didn't matter if the boost wouldn't be enough. He'd make it enough. It didn't matter if he was struggling to move. He'd force himself to move. The debuff in the corner had only but a second left. Afterward, he would be able to boost. 0. The fire roared in his soul. Oh, the earth and air vibrated harshly all around before the area around him while he began picking himself up. At his full height and despite the pain numbing him, the boy grinned, his glaring eyes shining an intense emerald. Then, a line of fire burnt the grass around him, forming a circle. Once it finished, the flame exploded upwards into a brilliant cyclone of impossibly hot fire through the clouds above. It could be seen for miles, piercing throughout the heavens. Bearing it all, an all-powerful voice rang out, Dragon Booster. However, Issei ignored it. He only needed to boost. 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 The fact that he had doubled his stats more than once didn't register as the battered boy took a step forward. He needed to take a few more steps to reach the group of scrambling Oni. His blood felt like it was boiling within him. The only thing keeping him feeling the full brunt was Gamer's body. However, even then, the sheer amount of power he gained in an instant was simply too much. Burst. Reset. The energy was flushed out of him into the suddenly dense air around him. Not long after, an aftershock blew everything back. The ground beneath him became a crater, trees were ripped from their roots, and the Oni were sent flying. The boy's eyes, which were once aflame with green, rolled back into his head as his body crumpled, like a puppet whose strings were cut. Nonetheless, he couldn't help the weak smirk splitting across his pained expression from seeing the Oni scramble backward. Still, the edge of his vision read 200 horsepower. Hopefully, the floor counts as a bed. If it did, he would be fully healed, broken bones, and all. If not, he expected 100 horsepower at the very least. His last sight, however, was strangely a window and a figure from the trees. Just then, various streaks of light flew from that very same direction. Name: Rainer. Race: Fallen. LVL. Description: moving to protect you. Emotions: shocked, hurried, alert. Following the window and light, various other prompts overwhelmed him as he lost consciousness. Among them, there was a new entry to angels and a new separate section added for the fallen. Once the speeding spears of light stabbed themselves into the ground around the unruly group of evolved Oni, streaks of light shot from them, connecting to the one beside them. They together formed a cage. Albeit, one a bit shorter than the Oni, one that could easily be jumped over. Noticing that, one of the Oni, Whack, tried to hop over only for the tips of all the spears to shoot upwards, then towards the center. It pierced through an arm and leg of the Oni easily, dragging him into the arm. All the while, he screeched in pain. Just inches from the floor, regret was apparent in his eyes for not being that much taller. The voice called out from trees, "I would love to torture you all about the Yaokai faction." The feminine voice stopped to sigh, but with the Long-Inus awakening, "I have to make this quick. Though, thanks for confirming it for me. I'll get to enjoy my date now." "Fallen!" Brack shouted out in defiance. Cork moved to follow suit, but was cut off as the three Oni were forced to their knees. The cage of light had closed in on them. It got to a point where Whack howled in pain, which peaked as the cage lopped off his arm completely. They were all being continuously burned by the cage while it dug into their skin and forced them into the ground. As the four-winged fallen fell into their light-burned vision, she shook her head before raising a hand. Brock's eyes showed determination rather than horror in one of his last acts of defiance as her open hand began closing. Fallen. The cage exploded, leaving only ashes and the burned tattooed arm of Whack behind. Again, she shook her head. If only Long-Inuses didn't notify literally the whole world to its presence, she would have some key info for her beloved Azazel. The rumors said they were in the talks with devils. What a waste. Even if her beloved Azazel would be much happier with confirmation about the location of another Long-Inus. The black-haired woman retained her wings, turning towards the fallen middle schooler. The golden fox, who Rainer was oblivious to the true nature of, was long gone. What unfortunate luck. She had been planning to awaken his true sacred gear if what her SG sensors were conveying was correct during their date on Sunday in a much safer method. Having been watching over him for a while, she has seen his twice critical. Oh well. She brushed the matted hair from his sweaty forehead. Finishing that, she readied a hand against his cleared forehead. She stopped, then narrowed her eyes in thought. The fallen played various scenarios. All were based on one catalyst, whether she erased his memory of the event. She had decided against erasing his memories of the experience. Well, a poor first encounter would make for distrust and disdain for the supernatural. If she revealed herself to be his guardian of sorts, his loyalty would be all for her beloved Azazel. She shuddered. The fact she found a 1 in a billion sacred gear all for her Azazel could only mean he would give her more attention. Never mind a rare specimen who had 2 sacred gears, naturally. Although, she wasn't quite sure what the second one was. The gust of wind that came from the vacuum left from sudden flames drew her from thoughts. She fought back a sigh. Her imagination would have to wait. Heaving the boy into her arms, she swung her hand out only to pause. She wondered if the boy had meant to run in a circle because she spotted his bag not too far away. Floating to it, she looked inside. There was nothing that stuck out to her. It was mostly homework and a progress log for his daily training. Placing it over his stomach, she didn't even bother to wave out a hand to cast a miracle that would clear out the traces of Issei and herself. Instead, she cast it mentally. The spell was to be delayed after she teleported and then was set to erase everything of their involvement. Such laziness would cost her as she teleported away. The delay was a bit too long. Hiding behind the fallen tree, the bright fox peeked out. She approached the area where the teleporting took place. Usually when teleporting took place, the scent of the other end of the portal would leak through. There was a small yelp of joy as she caught onto it before the delayed miracle could completely erode it. Hopefully, it would trace back to the trustworthy boy, which was strange and even rarer in the supernatural world. Her instinct said so, and they haven't been wrong ever. At the very least, she hoped to find the fallen's hideout where she could stalk the fallen to find the boy's home. He would protect her as he did earlier. Mama would be so happy to have the Sekiryuite on our side. Thanks for watching this video. Part 1 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support the Aerex for writing that awesome fanfic. See you in the next video. Goodbye.